I'm going to start with Parker, who comes all the way across the river from Franconia. And until his retirement, he practiced neurology at Dartmouth Hitchcock for more than 30 years. For 25 years, he was on the board of the Frost Place, also in Franconia, and taught at its summer festival. He's written and lectured on the interrelationship of medicine and the arts, and has volunteered in various places, including rural Honduras. He's published 3 poetry chapbooks, as well as the collection, which we have out front, This Weather Is No Room. And as you'll see reflected in the poems in this new book, The World Spread Out, Parker greatly enjoys hiking in the northern New England mountains. And Sidney Lee almost needs no introduction because he just completed his 4-year term as Poet Laureate of Vermont. He currently lives in Newbury, this side of the river, and where he's active in both literacy efforts and in conservation. He was educated at Yale, has taught there, as well as at Dartmouth, Wesleyan, Vermont, and Middlebury colleges, in addition to stints overseas in Switzerland and Budapest. He's received fellowships from the Rockefeller, Fulbright, and Guggenheim Foundations, and with 15 books to his credit, he's had various pieces, poems, essays, published in numerous publications, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, and Sports Illustrated, which seemed like a non-sequitur to me at the time.
Avant-garde poetry.
And so without further ado, please help me welcome Parker Towle.
Thank you, Liza. I'm delighted to be reading again here at the Norwich Bookstore, especially to do so with Sid Lee, who I've known for around 30 years, in connection especially with the Frost Place in Franconia, which is my hometown. Sid also did a lovely blurb for me on my first book, on the back cover, which I much appreciate. And my first poem is the dedication in the front of that book to my mother, Pearl Towle, fully able, gratefully at age 100, to tell me exactly what she likes and does not like about this collection. Mother was one that loved to roast and be roasted. At the end of 101 years, she lived beyond disease until all she could do was stop like an unwound clock. Her granddaughter stood on one side of the bed. We moved to the other and glanced up to one another. I thought of all the days in the last years I had driven the 3 hours down to the nursing home from the mountains, walked beside her as she eased her walker down the corridor to the sunroom, sat with her as she consumed every morsel on her tray or slid it along to me. How she examined the flower petals and leaves near the paths outside from her wheelchair, me pushing from behind. I remembered all the times we went for drives, amazed how she could swing herself from walker to car seat, and later reverse the process, each shift a small miracle accompanied by that pesky smile. On the day of the cloud of tears, we prepared to leave, having gotten no gesture of any kind that she was aware of us. I bent over and kissed her forehead. Without opening her eyes, she uttered in a distinct and perfectly articulated voice, "Where are you going?" "Home, Mother," I explained. "We'll be back." She smiled and opened her eyes. Her expression said, "Okay." This is a companion piece about my father, who predeceased my mother by 16 years. Worry never melted down his face. He celebrated every jolt into sunlight, every draft from the coal of tobacco in its bowl. His river teased many coves and rifts, picked up very little but never stopped. It meandered at the delta spread, gulped salt in one brackish stroke, but, gathering water from the mountains, cleared at last to open sea. Thus, in the season when the random leaf floats down in windless air, it flutters yet, nestled with its fellows in last colored light, to turn in a moment gray. We celebrate the future, even as it shortens, like a deer so delicate before us, nearly crazy with nostalgic joy. There's a epigraph in the front pages of my second collection of poems. That's this one. In fact, the final stanza, the answer, in a poem of mine entitled Reflections in the Form of Three Questions and One Answer, with which I preface my next two poems. What Dostoevsky found in Siberian prison was not God, but the possibility of God. In the mid-1980s, my church, a Franconia Community Church of Christ, sent 5 senior women driving with a van full of food and supplies to a remote village in Honduras called El Rosario. A medical mission called ACTS, Americans Caring, Teaching, and Sharing, was subsequently founded, and in more recent years its base of operations has been here in Norwich and the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth, including Dean Siebert, who some of you may be familiar, and others. Back in the 90s, Penny McConnell, this bookstore's owner, and her husband, Jim Gold, went on one of our trips. Honduras Mission. Brown baby, 3 years old, rod legs, knob knees, big dry eyes, aim recto up to you and me. One bony hand grasps a frayed shelf, bloated belly and flat, mud-encrusted feet blend into the ground. 6 brothers and sisters peer around, a little less moribund. Weeping heat flows through the narrow passage between the shacks. Nothing moves but haze and dogs, dirty as the children. A stone stove clouds the rancid air. Tortillas coagulate the fumes. I've never felt so watched. And in this Easter season, I relate another experience on one of our Honduran missions, which occurred in San Pedro Sula, which is the second largest city in Honduras. Palm Sunday, San Pedro Sula. Malarial shakes and dysenteric blood loss pierce the countryside. Bulbous bellies and stick-limb kwashiorkor ride out of the jungle on the backs of donkeys. At roadblocks and on city streets, soldiers wave automatic rifles with 7-Up decals on their stocks. The guns are loaded. Children in starched dressed clothes march behind the statue of Christ on a donkey borne on the elders' shoulders and sing Hosanna. Tightened fists open out under the donkey's hooves and Christ floats through waving palms to the cathedral. When the priest in white robes high on the balcony splashes water from the font, squeals rise from the crowd, tears run down their faces. Laughter and weeping sound the same in any language. To have seen the children was enough. This poem, this next one, is an elaborated true story. Buck. Cockeyed speculation, his old lady called it, when he said in his next life he'd return as a deer. Young buck with a big rack of horns, she smirked. He grumbled a deep cough, shuffled out with the care arthritic limbs demand, and stepped off the deck. Inside later, a chill hovered. He grabbed the shirt over his heart and twisted. Pulseless, he slumped to the floor like the bags of potatoes he'd stacked his whole life, wrinkled and soft as the last sack in spring, ready to split and seed. The death simmered down. People went home and she settled back in the house by the pond. I miss the old guy to haul wood. By Jesus, this house leaks as bad as a pail left 2 years on a stump. She was warmest in the upstairs bedroom, heat rising from the kitchen below. Sun once in a while beamed through the dormer that looked out at night like a one-eyed fool winking over the lake at those ice fishing idiots. She alone, stitching on a quilt. One night, she's about to snap off the light. Clump, clump on the deck. So she flips the switch and gazes down on the boards, streaked with moon reflected off the snow. The buck looks through the glass dining room doors, wood stove cracking red flame around its draft. Damn. He turns by the kitchen door, makes a feeble, clumsy hop on the steps, and ambles down the shoreline, picking his way, an old man out for fresh air and a smoke. This next is a childhood experience. Near the end, I borrow 2 lines from the Ciardi translation of Dante's Inferno, Canto 4, Limbo. Mount Mansfield, age 8. Partway through the night, my feet bound up in pain like a hawk's claws. After climbing the mountain with pack and parents, sleeping chilled under hard wool blankets on an iron cot in the unheated basement of the hotel under the nose, long gone now to expert trail and warming hut. We cooked out on the open ridge next morning, up toward the chin. Summit breeze fanning the flames of scrub. Me in shorts, khaki sweater, and scout issue low-cut shoes. The summer after Pearl Harbor. Dad too old to be drafted, handsome as a movie star. Mom brave as any recruit. We went on that day, below the nose, through a musty cavern of hanging moss and gnarled roots over great sheets of granite rock, so depthless, deep, and nebulous and dim. I had forgotten this cool, damp cave until now. When I enter again, strange, aura of deep solitude, another life, through a passageway to an unknown world that might have been 1,000 years, 5,000 years ago, or might be 1,000 years hence, or 5,000. Is this my limbo, the desolate chasm where rolls the thunder of hell's eternal cry? Poets emerge from the haze, God having taken away the saints into heaven. From then on, my legs were strong. This next, an expression of male adolescence in a small town in central Massachusetts in the late 1940s. Fire station. It sat to the side, tucked into trees as if ashamed, diminished by those 200-year-old white boxes of pine, Baptist and congregational spires aspirating heaven. A trinity of sirens rated on town hall roof. At the station, we shot pool. Up over the tanker, the hook and ladder on one dull ox of a table, green lamp coned down from a dusty cord as if set by Edward Hopper. The only other light these evenings of our youth, at ease over the fire trucks, shone through a door from the front, black and white TV, flickering off Friday night faces. Men clomped up the stairwell, hacking on the top step in the stinging fog of tobacco smoke, shouted or grumbled to someone, joked around the table, slumped in a chair. If they cursed us hogging the cues, we'd yield, go talk Graziano, Walcott, the kid. My friend, the chief's son, Lenny, racked up. I cleaned the marks down the wire. We dusted up. He imploded the balls like fireworks over a 4th of July field. My neighbor, black with the coal he shoveled all day, wove a stuporous line, sat down. Cigar smoke, blue as sky, could not blot the stench of old sweat crusted with blight. At 10 p.m. sharp, we switched to the fights. Forget pool, put away the cards. This was fisticuffs. Sluggers and boxers, black and white, bells and blood, no fancy graphics, no background tunes. These were fights, 3-rounders, 5-rounders, and a 10-round feature. Faces lit by the tube winced in synchrony to the hits, heads ducked, dodged, pursued, butt, bleed, cut, clinch, syllables of the ring and the room. Shoulders jerked with each jab, saliva drooled at the blood feast of some other man's pain. Then the wail careened on the roof, a long crescendo ring, hole full, burr down, then scream up again. Most of them jumped to the phones, streaked downstairs, broke into gear, cranked up the doors, mounted and rolled. Cars swirled in, turned and chased. Not on the crew. I was left spinning blue chalk to the tip of my cue. Final poem. A few years ago, Phyllis and I decided to canoe the upper Connecticut River, almost to Canada, in the late spring. We drove up in separate cars, left one at the Colbridge Bridge, and drove up to Canaan, Vermont, and then crossed the river to West Stewartstown and put in. Passage by canoe. It could have been an elm skeleton eroded from a bank of the upper Connecticut, floating to this narrow turn 10 feet deep and swift, hung up by its limbs like an iceberg, mostly underwater, bisecting the flow, yet drawing it to itself as if sucking water from root tips to branching arms pointing downstream like a drowning man or a Bedouin in quicksand, one hand visible twitching, pleading for air. In this near flood stage, late spring, we were being lofted from beneath more than ruddering the canoe. As we approached the tree, one of us said left by the sandbar, the other right on the peripheral curve. Broadsided between two ideas, we were drawn up and fixed on the jutting limb. We tipped eccentrically and filled with raw snowmelt. Swim to the sandbar, I pleaded twice. She launched off, whooping in the frigid pour, thrashing sparks in the river bend. I jockeyed the hull off the slimy limb, submarined it under another branch, and eased its royal waterloggedness to the sandbar farther down. Paddles and pack unlashed, we stripped to wring out and dry in hazy sun to the distant grind of a tractor across floodplain fields of corn. Cast off, we meandered by ducks diving in shallows, quarreling kingfishers, the whirl and sweep of swallows. In a wide and gentle whirlpool miles down the river, we dipped our paddles deep for the last time, swung to shore, two weathered salts in an old green canoe. Thank you.
I'm still cold. I did that in a single skull once in April, and that's an experience I've never forgotten. But I think I was out of it faster than you were. Well, it's a pleasure to read here. I'm so grateful to Liza and to her kin across the country. People like Parker and I depend on stories like this, and you have been more than generous to me. How's that? And some of you may have seen that Vermont Public Television thing the other night. That was shot here, I think last June. I don't remember. At any event, Norwich Bookstore is a wonderful store. I wish we were a little closer to where I live, but they've been very gracious to me. It's also a pleasure to read with Parker, whom I have known and admired for a long, long time. How he does this and still holds down the job where lives are at stake is beyond me. And none of the employment I've ever had involved life or death. So, and I still had a hard enough time cranking it out. So, salute to you, sir. I'm going to read mostly poems from this new book, which has this rather grisly cover, which was rendered by my brother's, one of my brother's twin daughters, Sonia Jordan Lee, who's a wonderful poet. And I usually have these sort of woodsy pastoral things. I thought it was time to get a little grimmer. I don't know why I decided that. I guess it might have something to do with age. I don't know. At any rate, I'm going to read a few poems from it. You can't stop me, I guess, at this point. The first one is called "A Man Tells a Story," and it is in fact based on a story that I heard a man tell. My late friend Bill Matthews was once asked at a New York reading, "Are those real poems or did you make them up?" Hard question to understand, let alone answer. I guess this is real to the extent it's a real story that I heard. The man tells a story. He described at the start how he bribed an older student to buy the wine. Rosé, of course. Some sappy song lay poised for the touch of the hi-fi needle. He lit 4 scented candles behind his curtains to cast what he thought would be a romantic glow. The flowers, he snickered, were roses, needless to say. Oh, I was full of originality. He almost believed the September breeze was panting along with him as he crossed the quad to the bus. Soon enough, Sandy or Sally, the name doesn't matter, got out, they embraced, then headed back to the dorm. Meanwhile, disaster. The breeze had blown the curtains against those candles. Steam leaked out of his window. The firemen had already spooled their hoses and gone. Not much of a blaze, he intoned, but it was flame that doused our flames. He pretended to tear his hair, then needlessly called his wrought-up paradox so much poetic bullshit, and there he ended. These many Septembers later, I made for the porch, looked across the fields to the star-pocked river, and heaved a sigh as real as my laughter had been. Like everyone there, I knew from the start they were done for. But hadn't we all suffered broken hearts when young and, of course, recovered? So this melancholy I felt wasn't a matter of a couple's love gone wrong. It was how in time we mock our very own dreams, whatever they are. Our best laid plans, as the poet famously called them, so often go down in flames that we may think we've grown wise from watching them die, that now we're seasoned enough for irony. Such adult dispassion, however, is hard to distinguish from resignation. Our little blazes spread to places we never predicted, and when what's left of all we long for reduces itself to ash, we shake our heads. We shake our heads and we laugh. There are a number of people here in the room who know me, and in spite of the drift of some of these poems, I'm really pretty upbeat company in real life. This is called She Recalls, a Book of Sayings. And it's resuscitated. This is one of the oldest germs of a poem that I've ever written. It was something I tried to write back in the 70s when I was particularly interested in the provenance of proverbs and how they became current. And I just came upon it when I was, Hercules tried to clean the Augean stables. That's what I do in my office every so often. And I came across this. She recalls a book of sayings. For some reason, she's moved by his chilly withdrawal to search for a fitting proverb. Why this one? Stay from among wild fowl if you fear the wagging of feathers. He jostled the china from her old wedding shower as he made his bumptious way to the crepitant hearth. She whispers, fire won't be hidden in flax. Her bouquet, when she flung it, was caught by an old maid aunt who twitted, after a wedding, beware a corpse. A joke, a taunt, but she still feels her own foreboding. Their wedding trip lulled her at first to imagine proverbial wedded bliss. She'd never known birds or sand so dazzling, nor yet known this restiveness. As they strayed on that luminous beach arm in arm, the passersby must have witnessed what looked like young love become full dark, the palms in their sudden stillness like milliners' plumes. Unnerving sensations flooded into her heart. She could never quite find the right words to name them, nor quite complain that they hurt. At trip's end, it shocked her. Their talk turned to anger, which at home soon became automatic. They were scarcely civil to one another, though they rarely grew histrionic. And after this late quarrel, hunched, vulturine, he strains to exude self-control. Through a living room window, she sighs as she sees their small twin girls who roll and flail in new snow, making side-by-side angels. Then, watching a raven drop from a leafless blue beach at a murderous angle, she gives the window a rap. She longs somehow to get the world back to what it once seemed right. Now, pale dawn, for instance, portends something black in the calmest of skies, unquiet. Truth shows best naked, she thinks. A mirror grows dark on the chiffonier. In its glass, a vague image which rapidly alters, first feathered, then shrouded, then bare. In 2008, I was on a panel down in Washington, D.C. I hope there's nobody here to get angry at me about this, but it was to select those National Endowment for the Arts poetry fellowships. And after one day of deliberation, it was a congenial crowd. It was a nice experience. In fact, I made a couple of new friends, but I was headed to meet some people whom I knew in town to a restaurant, and I came upon a African-American fellow at the top of a subway stair playing a tenor saxophone. Now, when I was a boy, I had dreams of being the white Ben Webster. I wanted to play the saxophone like him, to which there were a number of obstacles, primary among them being lack of talent. But I became a great fan, particularly of reed players in that era, roughly from there through what was called the late bop era. And this guy was really good. Big sign saying, "Help, I'm a homeless vet." And this is what eventuated Blues for the Tenor Man. You guard that treasure with a fierceness as great as your playing is masterful. So I imagine. I see it's a Selmer, top of the line, the kind of sax you could pawn for at least $1,000. No, more than that. Even 10 wouldn't cut it. I see your pants belonged to somebody else at one time, their shredded cuffs risen to display a strange blue latticework of lesions on ashen shins. The paper placard's scrawl is, "Help, I'm a homeless vet." I'd never have thought you smoked in a pipe of all things. Its wet, rough stem pokes out of your navy peacoat's rough side pocket. You're so good, you make some better part of me float to a long, closed club with someone like Sonny Stitt sweetly trotting his horn through the sunny side of the street, which happens to be the song your Selmer, above this tuneless traffic, sweetly offers. Quietly, but so intensely, I'd bet the flesh under your woolen hat must actually flinch. Raveling watch cap, it creeps on your head, it shivers. I might, of course, recall the other Sonny, or the great Coltrane, or the underprized Lucky Thompson. Jack and I played them all in that student apartment where, kids that we were, we imagined ways to resolve the world's most unaccommodating problems, of which, at least to us, racial relations, as people said back then, were among the first. We were children, but we worshiped the art that Roland Kirk had dubbed black classical music. And here you are to push me back to reverie and reverence. You slide straight into a blues in a minor key, blues new to me. Eyes clench, you rock and sway, the tenor igniting the stars. Blue pigeons drop from government marble, as if their tiny brains understood the mix of resolution and pain the music spreads around their strut. Their plumage seems to glow more warmly now, yet the damage that anyone's life can attract appears more clearly, brightness cutting the dark. That's the way of the blues. But what do I know? I'm headed off for a meal. To hand you a coin would somehow be to feel a lesser person. I wonder where Jack lives now. The Lucky, the Coltrane, the Sonny, and hundreds more. They were gems we'd gathered from hock shop and secondhand store and were stolen one night. If only we'd kept up our guard. It wouldn't have happened if only we'd known how to hold on to what we treasured, how suddenly things can be taken, though a record collection is only a record collection. You'll huddle beneath whatever wrappings you gather against the cold of the night, the noble Selmer, the pearl of great price locked on your chest with both hands as you sleep. But so I imagine. As evening steals in, your horn moans an aching cadenza that ends the tune. Commuters pour down into the metro unhearing. The pigeons flap roostward. Soon there will be nothing for you to lie down with again but what you love, under a bridge, in a shelter, wherever you live. I'll read a new poem, newish, called Machu Picchu. And I got thinking, when you were in San Pedro, did you meet a doctor named Rodrigo Martinez by any chance? He's a cardiologist. Yeah, he was my college roommate. He was in San Pedro Sula. Machu Picchu. A young friend and his lovely wife from Peru want to lead a community hike through the mountains there. I've always dreamed of going to Machu Picchu. I keep on dreaming that I'm still 24. We're at our pal Marv's old fishing shack on Cape Cod. Its stairway is steep, so I'm glad there are railings to cling to. My knees are 73 years old as I write. God knows I'll never climb to Machu Picchu. I have 5 small grandchildren now. I had to stay alive this long to love them. The youngest one is 8 weeks old and smiling. There are seals in the bay each time we friends go fishing. Today at dawn, I watched a sanderling flit to the beach and nab a hermit crab. There's a loud osprey nest by the landing. Soon the chicks will fly off on their own, but come to that, why haven't they done so already? October looming. Truth is, I can't say. I can't say why they're still here. I had to stay alive this long to know what I don't know and what little I do. I've stayed behind this evening while the others go looking for blues. I won't reach Machu Picchu. There are thousands of things I'll never do. The news says thousands will perish in Africa, Ebola. Through a window pane, I see Virginia creeper choking a larch, whose needles all have yellowed. Later on, they'll fall with the season. I can't find words to render justly the beauty of the long vine's leaves as they turn, the cold, dimmed edges framing the blaze at their center. This is an older poem from the book preceding this one. I have 5 children, father to 5 children. 2 were by a first marriage, and then 3 more came. They all stayed together. They call each other brother and sister rather than stepbrother or half-brother or whatever. So there was an interlude of 39 years in which there was always at least one child under my roof, and 37 when there were at least 2. And when the empty nest came, I wasn't happy about it. I didn't like it a bit. In fact, the grandchildren started arriving just in time. But at any rate, when the youngest one, she's the one that called me, when I said, I put the phone to my chest and said, I'm the Poet Laureate. She said, I think it's pronounced low rate. At any rate, I didn't have 10 seconds to gloat, before. But she's very witty, and I miss her greatly. I'm going to go out and see her in California next week. Now, this is called To a Young Father. Some of you who live up my way will recognize some of the landmarks that are referred to here. This river bend must have always been lovely. Take the 1-lane iron bridge shortcut across the town's west end and look downstream to where the water backs up by the falls. Boys once fished there with butterball bait because the creamery churned by hydro, and the trout were so rich, says my ancient neighbor, that they tasted like heaven, only better. Try to stop on the bridge if no one's coming to see the back of the furniture mill and upside-down detail on the river, assuming the day is clear and still. I've lived here and driven this road forever. Strange, therefore, that I've never taken the same advice I'm offering you. I've lived here, but I've too often been racing to get to work or else back home to my wife and our younger school-aged children, the 5th and last of whom will be headed away to college come this autumn. I hope I paid enough attention to her and the others in spite of the lawn, the plowing, the bills, of the urgent concerns of career and upkeep. Soon she'll be gone. Try to stop on the bridge in fall. That is when hardwood trees by the river drop carmine and amber onto the surface. Or in spring when the foliage has gotten no bigger than any newborn infant's ear, such that the light from sky to stream makes the world, as I've said, or at least this quarter, complete, in fact double. I'd never have dreamed a household entirely empty of children. It'll be the first time in decades, which may mean depression, and if so, indifference to the river's reflections, the leaves and shades, but more likely, like you, if you shrug off my counsel, or even if you take it, it'll be through tears that I witness each of these things so lovely. They must have been lovely all these years. There's some more hiding in here, if you'll indulge me. Stick season. This came out of a commentary that my friend and former student Peter Gilbert, who's the head of the Vermont Humanities Council now, he had one of his wonderful commentaries on Vermont Public Radio, which was called Stick Season. So I dedicated the poem to him and stole his title, suppose that. Boy, it's amazing that, here he is, an extraordinary individual. And then Rachel Richardson will be reading here. Another former student, my gosh. Probably her daughter will be reading the next thing I know. At any rate, stick season. The one that precedes my season is the one that always shows in those quaint calendar photographs. The one that brings the tourist to a scene that is sumptuous, granted, exorbitant on the side hills. Most of the leaves incandescent, drifting or plunging downward to scuttle along the roadbeds like little creatures reluctant to be seen, yet wanting us to notice them after all. But give me this, middle November, season of sticks, of stubborn oak and beech leaves, umber and dun, which rattle in gusts that smell so elemental they stab your heart. The trees, the other unclothed ones, are standing there, gaunt but dignified, and you could look straight through them to the contours of the mountains, stark perhaps, but lovely in their apparent constancy. That gap-toothed barn houses space alone since its owner died. Do you remember Studebaker's? That's one over there, a pickup truck, flat-footed among the sumacs. Painted green way back, these days it has taken the hue of these later leaves I love. Old age has changed the mountains too. They're rounder now than once, worn smoother. Everything is for a time. And the newest poem I have is called The Long and Short. A storekeeper I was fond of. I've changed his and his wife's name. I'll stop myself because I could tell you many a story about this fellow. But after he died, I went to call on his widow, and I just happened to think of that recently. It's been a while since he passed. It's called The Long and Short. Betty, as always, was making donuts. Why would she stop, I suppose, even though her husband had died 2 nights before? The general store would keep buying her stuff. People loved those donuts, plain as they were. I could tell she was cooking before I knocked by smelling the heat of her fryolator. I'd known them forever. No storybook marriage, but she and Dale, for the most part, got on the way old couples usually manage. Grease smoke mixed with that wet dog odor in the woods, which signals we'll soon get snow. 2 flickers flush from behind their trailer. Dale was suddenly gone. Here, then gone. I pictured his walk, how he reeled like a sailor after a long log rolled off a truck years back and turned both femurs to dust. A 3-legged chipmunk ducked under a down's dead hemlock. I watched a pigeon slip into the loft of their buckling barn. It felt fitting, all these varied signs that boded winter. Mind you, I did like Dale, and would miss him all right. Yet I caught myself surprised and ashamed in a sort of rehearsal for Betty of poignant recall and grief. No matter a small brook cheerfully chimed 100 yards off, no matter the field which someone had planted with rye for cover through the coming cold, but green as spring, Betty called me inside. She was leaning over her stove, She smiled and wept at once, and the tears fell into the bubbling basket, each drop hissing and dancing inside. Life struck me abruptly as both long and short. They're lively anyway, Betty cried. Two more. This one is called Bourgeois with Bag, and I'm referring to that bag. So I bought in Italy years ago when I was lucky enough to have a Guggenheim Fellowship and couldn't think of anything more original to do than spend it in Tuscany. And I bought it in an Italian sporting goods shop. It's supposedly an ammunition bag. Now, only the Italians would imagine anything quite so elegant to carry bullets. At any rate, I'm very fond of it. Just a little bit, I think maybe a month after I was appointed the Poet Laureate, I went down to give a reading in Dallas, Texas. And after it was over, I came outside and about 20 rounds of small arms fire went off. At which point I thought to myself, I'm glad I'm the Poet Laureate of Vermont, not Texas. I didn't think any such thing. I was scared to death. I didn't know where the gunfire was coming from. Stupidly, I pathetically held this little bag in front of my midsection thinking that it might protect me. It is, after all, an ammunition bag. Anyway, bourgeois with bag. I eased my laptop down its leather throat. How many times have we boarded planes by now? The bag's been with me so long I never figured on buying it how perfectly it would fit a computer. I never even used a computer. Just noisily tapped away at my Smith Corona, machine once dear to my heart. Where is it now? I churned out poems that summer, a rich foundation paying our Tuscan rent. And I've kept the bag through sharper changes in techno-revolution. The children grown and gone, the grandchildren born, the myriad wonders. It makes no sense at all that the bag's soft, rumpled hide, the straps more slender than a woman's bras, the buckles bent by age. It makes no sense that they comfort me whenever I feel them. Still, they do. The bag was hanging in the alcove window of a Sienese sporting shop deep back in an alley, safe from a humbling sun. I wasn't looking at all for something to soothe me. Through the gloom of shade, I saw its leather shine like an icon of any youthful man's desire. And it's ridden with me for over 30 years. The proprietor said it was meant for ammunition, though what hunter would use it for bullets, I can't imagine. It's seen 100 classrooms, 500 lections. Last night I pulled a few new poems from the bag, some late attempts at whatever I'm trying to say, and read them aloud to a gracious Texan crowd, which included a writer my age I much admire, who during the Q&A announced out loud, my work reminded him how deeply in love we all should be with earthly things that die. But the bag never judges whether I'm what you'd call a success or not. It just sits beside me, patient in buses, planes, and cars, quiet bearer of all those efforts at meaning. This thing must know me, I think, however absurdly inanimate, I whisper. Yet something in me supposes it otherwise. Nothing has been so full of my private existence. It's scarcely spectacular, that hidden life, but I feared for it. And the public one as well. When I walked outside to the street, my reading ended. Some 20 rounds of small arms fire broke out in the air around the corner from where I stood. I held the bag to my chest like a shield. I'm better at a bourgeois sort of existence than any other. The past, says the old cliche, swims by one's eyes, and so it did. The finer part, the marriage, the children, the children, the children. I all but cried. And now I can smirk at what some poets call courage. This is the only life I've ever owned. Through much of it, I've held to my ammunition pack, keepsake from when I dared to presume the world was all before me. As in fact it was, in another way from when I thought the years would be stuffed with nothing but fervor. As in fact they've been, just differently, as I say. So here we are, Leaving the Dallas airport, still mostly sound, my bag and I, not long till we take the air. We're on our way now. Soon we'll clear the ground. I like to go on the river. I used to, no real runner would have used this verb, but I used to kind of run through the woods to try and keep in some semblance of shape, and then my knees gave out when I was about 60. And I took up in what the low-rate daughter referred to as a fit of geezer madness. I took up the sport of competitive flatwater kayaking, and that's easy for me because there's no impact and I can get on the river in 5 or 10 minutes. But on such days as I'm not doing that, I will often go down with my beloved wife and in an open canoe, and nothing as adventurous as Parker. We'll just kind of drift down that languorous portion of the river up our way in Newbury. And this poem arises from one such little casual paddle. My wife's back, it's called. All naked but for a strap, it traps my gaze as we paddle. The dear familiar nubs of spine bone punctuating that sun-warmed swath. The slender muscles that trouble the same sweet surface. We've watched and smiled as green herons flushed and hopped ahead at every bend, and we've looked up at a red tail tracing open script on a sky so clear and deep we might believe it's autumn. No matter, it's August still. Another fall will be on us before we know it. Of course, we adore that commotion of color, but it seems to come again as soon as it's gone away. They all do now. My love for you for nearly 40 years extends in all directions, but just now to your backs we drift and paddle down the tranquil Connecticut River. We've seen a mink scratch fleas on a mudflat. We've seen an osprey start to dive, but seeing us think better of it. 2 phoebes wagged on an ash limb. Your torso is long. I can't see your legs, but they're longer, I know. Phoebe, osprey, heron, hawk. Marvels under Black Mountain, but I'm fixed on your back. Indifferent to other wonders. The bright minnows that flared in the shallows. The gleam off that poor mink's coat. Even the fleas in its fur, the various birds, the lust of creatures, just to survive. But I watch your back. Never have I wished more not to die. Thank you.